The purpose of this is to reflect on my work, showcase my accomplishments, and inspire other developers. I'm Paul Avalone, and I make games. Arashi Castles of Sin was a PlayStation VR exclusive that was released in 2021, which was very late in the console's lifecycle. I briefly worked on Arashi Castles of Sin Final Cut. It was a project at Forward XP working with Skydance and Endeavor One to port and improve the original game for modern VR consoles. Those consoles being the PlayStation VR 2, Meta Quest 2 and 3, and PC VR, which includes the Vive, Index, and Rift. When it comes to the controls, it couldn't be a straight translation. The PSVR was released in 2016 to be used with the PlayStation 4. It uses the same move controllers that originally came out in 2010 to be used with the PlayStation 3, as Sony's response to the remarkably successful Nintendo Wii and its famous Wiimote, similar to how Microsoft responded by creating the Kinect for the Xbox 360. The PlayStation Move controllers were extremely outdated with 5 face buttons and no thumbstick, something that all modern VR controllers have. So Arashi's controls needed a complete redesign to fully utilize the new standard VR inputs. The first thing I did was thoroughly play the game all the way through. Because I was the first person on the team to do this, I was often the source of knowledge early on. I was quick to answer any artist's questions about the game when they were determining what were important assets that needed attention as they planned how best to downgrade the game so it could function on the much less powerful Quest 2 and 3. While it's not required of every person on the team to play the game, it definitely helps communication by creating a shared understanding. 2 of us were tasked with determining how we could potentially improve the game's combat by playing some reference games. We played 2 VR sword games that were extremely popular and well received. The first one was Blade and Sorcery. We played it separately and then thoroughly broke down and discussed our thoughts with each other. We wrote up a document that listed the positives and negatives of Blade and Sorcery, the positives and negatives of Arashi, and what we could potentially do to improve Arashi. Because Blade and Sorcery had physics-based combat and Arashi had animation-based combat, there were some things that we couldn't properly compare because even though they were both sword combat games, they were drastically different in style. We decided that we wanted to play a reference game that also had animation-based combat, so we could have a closer comparison. So the second reference game we played was Until You Fall. We wrote up a document in the same style and structure as the first reference game. While you may take some things from reference games, it's not about straight up copying what other games have done. You analyze them to gain a wider range of knowledge in order to help you come up with new ideas and solutions that are specific to your game. It gives you perspective on what choices other developers made and how they solved problems. Reference games are also about creating a shared language and, well, a point of reference when explaining features so that other developers on your team can better understand what you're trying to do. This is something that's done at every game studio. I whiteboarded some ideas for the layout of the new controls using knowledge from playing Arashi, the 2 reference games, and the many VR games I've played over the years. From that, I made an Excel sheet of the current temporary Arashi PC build controls and 2 new control schemes. One was the simplest translation of the original controls I could make, where like the original PSVR controls, you cycle through your weapons with 2 buttons. The other was a more ambitious and immersive version, where the weapons could be grabbed from different positions on your body. I provided 2 options, one that was quick, and one that required an overhaul of the player mechanics, because we didn't know how many resources we were going to put into it. It's always best to have options for different scopes. Soon after doing this, I was swapped to a different project. At some point in development, my control scheme got reworked. In game development, people have their work altered, replaced, or discarded because iteration is such a large part of the process. It's not uncommon, especially early in the project, for priorities to shift and for goals to change. I honestly would have been shocked if it stayed exactly the same. The final version in the game is actually pretty similar to my immersive version. One small issue with my draft was there was more weapons than there were convenient places on your body to store them, so it was a little cluttered. Over the course of the game, the player had 2 blades, a bow, a grapple hook, a blowgun, a flintlock pistol, along with 5 different throwable objects: shuriken, gas grenade, frag grenade, explosive mine, and poisoned food. We briefly discussed having an inventory system to solve this problem. After I was working on other things, they developed an inventory system to swap out what weapons are assigned to your body. I had 9 slots in my design and was trying to reduce it to 8. In the final version, they settled for just 6 slots. 2 on the waist, 2 on the chest, and 2 over the shoulder. Also, there are a few other small button differences here and there. While I had wanted to be on the project I was moved to, I was still slightly bummed I couldn't see my work all the way through, but I couldn't do both. Sometimes you just have to let things go. There were some positives that came from this. Some of the knowledge I learned from my brief stint on Arashi ended up being useful for the project I was swapped to. Also, the work I had done for Arashi became a jumping off point for the people that took over my part. It's important to remember that there's usefulness in first drafts. It helps inform decisions, and it removes the blank page problem. Even though my work was altered in the final product, you can still see the remnants of what I did. I know that it was an appreciated stepping off point and that it still contributed to the project as a whole.